Good morning, everyone. My name is Shanika, and welcome to our World Humanitarian Day 2025 webinar. The title of the webinar is From Crisis to Community, Connecting Humanitarian Action with Climate Rights and Sustainable Development. Thank you for joining us from near and far. Today, on World Humanitarian Day, we pause to honor the countless individuals, both seen and unseen, who dedicate their lives to helping others in crisis, conflicts, and hardships. This day serves as a powerful reminder for our shared responsibility to care for one another, to stand in solidarity with communities in need. As we recognize the courage of commitment of humanitarian workers, we also focus on educating and inspiring others, especially youths, to take meaningful actions. By learning about global challenges and hearing real stories from the field, people can discover how they too can make a difference, whether through advocacy, service, or innovative solutions. This webinar offers a unique opportunity to explore the realities and complexities of humanitarian work, examine global crises, and will also dive into the critical connections between humanitarian challenges, climate change, and sustainable development, highlighting how these issues intersect and require integrated, forward-thinking solutions. Our goal is to equip participants with the knowledge and tools to engage in humanitarian actions, influence policy, and drive lasting positive changes to their communities and beyond. I'll be co-hosting this webinar along with my amazing colleagues. Can I get everyone to wave for me, please? To begin this presentation, we acknowledge the land which constitutes the present city of the city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territories of the Mississauga of Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot nations. We recognize these people and their ancestors as many people who inhabited their lands since time immemorial. The city of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous people. I'll now pass it on to my colleague.
The Sustainable Community Aid Network SCAN is a community-based organization committed to building inclusive, sustainable futures through education, engagement, and advocacy. The heart of SCAN's mission is the belief that climate action must be equitable and that meaningful environmental change starts with informed and empowered communities. Through a range of culturally responsive programs, including environmental education, climate justice webinars, youth entrepreneurship, and food security initiatives, SCAN works at the intersection of environmental sustainability and social equity. By centering the lived experience of marginalized and racialized groups, SCAN ensures that no one is left behind in the transition to a greener Canada. In alignment with the World Humanitarian Day, SCAN proudly presents the webinar Our Mandate from Crisis to Community and leads the Awareness to Action campaign. This initiative highlights the link between humanitarian challenges and climate impact and raises awareness of growing human rights risks, and emphasizes the importance of sustainable development. Together, we aim to shift from crisis response to building resilient, empowered community. This work directly connects with the mission of Sustainable Community Aid SCAN, whose program focuses on long-term support through local empowerment, environmental justice, and equitable development. SCAN's efforts in community engagement, education, and sustainable aid reflects a holistic approach to humanitarian response, ensuring that recovery goes hand in hand with resilience and lasting change. EnvironBuzz magazine is a leading voice in the environmental, social, and governance ESG storytelling, empowering individuals, businesses, and communities to share their sustainability journeys and inspire meaningful change. It is ranked 10th in the top 25 ESG magazine on the web and 12 among green business blogs by FeedSpot. EnvironBuzz reaches over 43,000 unique visitors with features published weekly. The magazine provides a high-impact platform to showcase progress, raise ESG profiles, and build credibility in the global sustainability space. As a proud partner from the Crisis to Community webinar and the Awareness to Action campaign, EnvironBuzz is committed to amplifying voices that are turning climate consciousness into tangible community-rooted action.
Here's a breakdown of what we will be discussing today. We have 6 amazing speakers with us today, and they'll be introduced at different stages of the webinar. We will have a keynote speaker on connecting humanitarian action with climate rights and sustainable development by one of our speakers, and we'll move on to the featured presentation. Next, we'll be doing a quick activity, which is an interactive poll, and we'll have 3 sets of polls throughout the webinar. We'll be sending a post-event report and recording for the webinar. We'll introduce the last 4 speakers, and they will talk about their great work they're doing with their organization, and immediately after will be a panel discussion. We'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. Please put all your questions in the chat, and my colleague will present the community challenge that we aligned up during this campaign. And finally, we will close the webinar with a few words about our upcoming webinar and close the presentation. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Darcy Knoll. Darcy Knoll is a seasoned communication professional with nearly 20 years of experience in domestic and international issues. He is currently the Senior Communication Officer at UNHCR Canada, leading the agency's communication and external relations. Previously, he has served as communication advisor for the Ottawa Carleton District School Board and worked with CARE Canada, managing media relations during global crisis and natural disasters. I'll now pass it on to Darcy.
Thank you so much. Okay, good morning. Yes, my name is Darcy, and I lead the communications and external relations team at UNHCR. I am based in Ottawa, and it truly is a pleasure to be here today. I want to thank the team at SCAN for inviting me to speak. Now, allow me to start with a bit of background. So UNHCR is the United Nations Refugee Agency. We're dedicated to saving lives, protecting rights, and building a better future for refugees, internally displaced people, and stateless individuals. When I say refugees, I'm referring to people forced to flee their country due to war, violence, or persecution. We operate in over 130 countries around the world. In Canada, we work closely with governments, elected officials, municipalities, civil society, private sector partners, and individual Canadians to find solutions for refugees and the communities that generously support them. Today is August 19th, as was noted. It's World Humanitarian Day. It's a moment to reflect on and honor the brave individuals working to save lives and support vulnerable populations around the world. This work is often dangerous. Within UNHCR alone, we recorded close to 500 security-related incidents last year, including the tragic loss of one colleague in an armed conflict and others who were seriously injured. Across the UN, last year marked the deadliest year on record for humanitarian workers. 2025 is on track to be even worse. It's important to remember that the majority of humanitarian workers are local staff and volunteers, the brave folks who just want to help. The challenges they face in this line of work are many, but I do want to highlight a couple. The first is, of course, funding. At my agency, while the number of people displaced has doubled in the past decade, our total budget remains virtually the same. We're long past the point of trying to do more with less. It's an acknowledgement that we must do less with less. Serious funding cuts limit our ability to carry out essential work, and ultimately it's the displaced and vulnerable populations who pay the price. In the context of today's discussion, I want to highlight a second growing challenge, and that's the impact of climate change on our efforts. So people often ask, how does climate change relate to your work with refugees? And it's a great question, one that we truly need to consider. Currently, there are more than 120 million displaced people worldwide, including refugees, internally displaced, and stateless individuals. Although violence and conflict remain the primary causes, the impact of climate change is immense and growing. According to a 2024 UNHCR report, about 90 million forcibly displaced people live in countries with high to extreme exposure to climate-related hazards. That's 75% of all forcibly displaced people. As these hazards increase in the coming decades, the risk for displaced people and their hosts will grow significantly. By 2040, the number of countries facing extreme climate-related hazards is expected to rise from 3 to 65, the vast majority of which are hosting displaced populations. Extreme heat will rise significantly, with most refugee settlements and camps projected to experience twice as many days of dangerous heat by 2050. Climate change worsens the conditions for people who have already fled violence and persecution. It basically makes a bad situation worse. It's difficult to predict the extent to which changing weather patterns will impact human mobility in the future. Much will depend on the resilience of countries and communities to climate change, and on how climate-related hazards and disasters interact with other factors. What is clear, however, is that these hazards multiply risk, posing significant threats in fragile contexts where the capacity to adapt is already strained. Climate impacts can exacerbate underlying structural vulnerabilities, such as political instability, inequality, food insecurity, economic fragility, and large-scale population movements. Indeed, the history shows us how environmental stress can trigger conflict. Droughts, for example, have played a role in uprisings as far back as the French Revolution. In already fragile settings, these pressures may intensify security challenges and deepen instability, potentially overwhelming state institutions and increasing the risk of violence and conflict. Said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, where climate change dries up rivers, reduces harvests, destroys critical infrastructure, and displaces communities, it exacerbates the risks of instability and conflict. But this isn't just about the future risk of climate change. Things are getting worse right now. For example, our team met a 60-year-old man living in a refugee settlement in Pakistan. The family fled Afghanistan's civil war in the early 1990s, and then were forced to flee raging floodwaters during Pakistan's monsoon rains in 2010 and again in 2022. In the most recent displacement, the surging river swept away their home and belongings in minutes, leaving the man scrambling to find food and clean water and wonder how he could provide for his family. Another woman we spoke with in Kenya told our team about the challenges trying to feed her children amidst ongoing conflict and persistent drought in her home, Somalia. When rains failed for 5 seasons in a row, she took her children, elderly mom, and extended family across the border to live in Dadaab, Kenya. These stories of how climate change makes a hard situation worse are becoming more common. So how should we respond? To quote Mohammed Anwar, a teen living in a refugee camp in Bangladesh, it's essential for refugees to come together on climate issues. And that's just what they did. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. It faces increasingly frequent and intense storms and flooding. Mohammed's youth group of Rohingya refugees worked to clean up waste in their community and clear and expand a stream that regularly flooded. They also planted trees and grasses along the banks. It was not only an effort to improve conditions in their area, they also learned about climate and environmental management. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world in Colombia is another example. In the coastal city of Turbo, mangroves serve as a vital natural barrier between land and sea. Unfortunately, over the years, local forests have been lost to deforestation, pollution, and coastal development. A UNHCR-supported group of local fishermen and people displaced by conflict came together to plant trees and clean up the area. Their work has helped improve water flow, reduce pollution, and create a healthier ecosystem. There are other ways we can consider environmental needs in our planning. 7 years ago, I visited Azraq. It's a sprawling refugee camp in the middle of the Jordanian desert. Together with partners, UNHCR built the world's first solar-powered refugee camp. Not only did this offer families access to power for lights and to run basic appliances, we also save money on energy bills and cut carbon emissions. So these are just a few examples of the ways we're adapting. But on a broader level, we also need to elevate refugee voices in global climate discussions. Displaced people are among those most exposed and vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Yet they're rarely consulted or given a seat at the table in the design of strategies and policies. This can mean that funding intended to support helping communities adapt doesn't help those in areas of significant need. 2024 UNHCR analysis found that climate financing has failed to reach refugees, host communities, and others in fragile and war-torn countries. According to the study, extremely fragile states receive only about $2 per person in annual adaptation funding. That's an astounding shortfall when it's compared to $161 per person in non-fragile states. When investment does reach fragile states, more than 90% goes towards capital cities, while other places rarely benefit. This speaks to the need to better understand the experiences of those who are already facing serious risks. Those, might I add, who, of course, are least responsible for climate change. In the past, climate change conversations were often framed as generational. We need to act now to protect our grandkids. Of course, this still remains true. But as our cities here choke on smoke in the summer, and people forced to flee war must also contend with drought, flooding, or extreme heat, there's a vital need to address the impact of a changing climate today. This means we must draw upon the perspectives of those most vulnerable to future shocks and those already living through them. It also means finding ways to come together to act. I understand that some of you here may be students or early in your careers, and this is the challenge I present to you. How do we heal the rift that has led to inaction, or even worse, led to hostility against climate action? This will require a shift in how we communicate and engage. We need to cut through jargon and speak plainly. We need a reset in how we talk about climate change. It also means approaching these conversations with empathy and understanding, even towards those who may seem opposed. This won't be easy. It may be frustrating, but the stakes are too high and the consequences are already unfolding. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your insights and your important work. I hope we all learned something valuable from his perspectives and his initiative he has highlighted. Now, featured presentation presented by Ogi Agisabi. Obi is a visionary leader in sustainability and environmental management, renowned for her expertise in ESG strategies and climate justice. As a founder of ESG and climate justice, as a founder of SCAN and the founder of CEO on EnvironBuzz, an award-winning environmental consulting firm, she drives a transformative solution aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. A certified environmental manager, auditor general, and sustainability professional, Obi brings over 24 years of experience leading across border sustainability initiative, corporate solution investment programs, and climate action project. Her work focuses on fostering inclusive community development, advancing climate resilience, and promoting innovative, equitable solutions for sustainable future. She's passionate about bridging policies with grassroots impact. Obi is a speaker, advisor, and advocate for sustainable business practices, environmental justice, and ethical leadership. Through her ventures, she continues to inspire organizations and individuals to take bold, measurable steps to take greener, more just world. I'll now pass it on to Obi.
Thank you, Shanika. So welcome everyone. I'm happy to be here with you today to explore how climate action is not just an environmental issue, but a humanitarian one, especially here in Canada, and how we can take action. Also want to thank Darcy. That was an excellent keynote speech and it was very enlightening. Okay, why humanitarianism and climate are interlinked? Okay, so humanitarianism is about protecting human dignity. In Canada, climate pressures are worsening inequities around housing, food security, Indigenous rights, and disaster response. Next slide. So we look at Indigenous rights and climate justice. Look at the water advisory percentages, the food insecurity, the biodiversity protection. So Indigenous people are frontline defenders of land and water, yet they face disproportionate burdens. So unsafe water, high food insecurity, climate disruptions. Supporting Indigenous leadership is essential for humanitarian action. Next slide. So climate disasters in Canada. So 2023 was record-breaking when it came to wildfires. They've had mass displacements and then huge economic impact. So Canada is not immune. So like wildfires, floods, extreme weather are displacing people, destroying homes and costing billions. So humanitarian organizations in Canada are increasingly responding to climate-driven emergencies. Next slide. So the figures. So the figures are there for you to see in terms of where Canada is in terms of housing, annual homelessness, co-housing. So housing is a human right. So climate extremes make life on the streets even deadlier. So, and Canada's housing crisis is worsening vulnerabilities. Let's move to the next slide. So food insecurity in Canada. So who is most affected? So food insecurity in Canada isn't evenly distributed, as you can see. It reflects deep structural inequities. In 2022, more than 1 in 5 people from racialized groups reported food insecurity, with the highest rate among Black Canadians at nearly 1 in 3. For Indigenous communities, the numbers are even starker. 1/3 of First Nation people living off reserve experience food insecurity. Compare that to 15.7% for non-Indigenous population. These figures remind us that climate impacts, humanitarian challenges, and systemic inequities overlap in very real ways. Addressing food insecurity must include addressing real racial and Indigenous inequities. Next one. So humanitarianism in Canada's global role and Canada's global role. So as you can see, Canada has a reputation as a humanitarian leader in resettlement, right? Canada, from fall 2015 to 2025, they resettled over 100,000 Syrian refugees. From August 2021, over 40,000 refugees have been resettled, right? According to the World Bank Groundwell report, climate migration is projected to displace 153 million globally by 2050. So climate, like I said, Canada, like I said, has a reputation as a humanitarian leader in resettlement. But climate migration will create new challenges. So can we lead globally while addressing inequities at home? Next slide. So climate action in Canada is not environmental, it's humanitarian, it's food, it's water, it's housing, it's rights, and it's safety. Next slide. So the SDGs as our roadmap. So the SDGs give us a roadmap to bridge humanitarian action, climate resilience, and human rights protection. So according to UNDP projections, achieving sustainable development goals could lift more than 500 million people out of extreme poverty by 2030. Next slide. So looking at like next couple of slides, we'll be looking at from reactive to proactive, so building climate resilience. So in this slide, we're looking at disaster response, climate resilience. So being reactive is sending emergency relief after a flood, wildfire, or drought. Being proactive is investing in early warning systems, community preparedness training, and climate adaptive infrastructure, e.g. flood-resistant housing and microgrids. Second one is hunger versus sustainable food security. So being reactive is food aid distribution after a famine. Being proactive, reporting regenerative agriculture, empowering local farmers, and improving access to climate smart seeds technologies. Next slide. So now this is shelter resilient communities. So reactive is building temporary shelters and displacement. Proactive, investing in affordable green housing, land rights protection, and urban planning that reduces disaster risk. Next slide. So livelihood to economic inclusion. So reactive, short-term cash assistance or job placement post-crisis. Being proactive, skills training aligned with green jobs, entrepreneurship pathways, and job transition policies. So every $1 invested in risk reduction saves $6 in response courses. Next slide. And then finally, you have health to prevention and equity. So medical missions, so reactive is medical missions after disease outbreak. Proactive is strengthening local health systems, vaccination campaigns, and addressing climate-related health risks. So you're looking at heat stress, vector-borne diseases. Next slide. So the Humanitarian Climate Development Nexus. This was put together by the UN agencies. So it just shows an interaction. This interaction is where meaningful change happens. So no single sector can act alone. So we need integration. Next slide. So youth as change agents. So breaking it down, right? Youths are not just the future, they are the present, already driving innovation in humanitarian response and climate change. So youth-led, you have under climate activism, so youth-led climate strikes driving policy change, the humanitarian tech, so developing solutions for crisis response, grassroots projects, so local initiatives with global impacts. So 70% of youth believe that their generation has the skill to solve climate and humanitarian challenges, according to the ILO report. So call to action. So what can we do? Things that can be done. So advocate for integrated climate and humanitarian action and policies. align skills with impact. So we started under the purpose skill framework. So we started with the purpose, we have a purpose skill network, which is a mentorship cycle, which we started where we bring our youths together and we invite all of you to join. So you be mentors, you be mentees, depending on either you're the learner or you want to learn, depending. But either ways, we always learn. And then you can also participate in our initiatives, STAN's initiatives, because I think we do have great initiatives and you can reach out to us to know more. And then support local and indigenous leadership. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so quote, humanitarian response is not just about aid, it's about justice, climate justice, social justice, and human dignity. So as we mark World Humanitarian Day, let's remember every action counts when humanity and the planet are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you, Obi, for that amazing presentation. I hope we all walked away with a clearer understanding of how to connect our strengths to greater purpose, both professionally and personally, and how the different humanitarian crises are affecting everyone and the climate.
Next, we have our second set of poll questions for everyone to participate in. Take a minute to answer these questions that will pop up on your screen about how you have made a difference and what contributions have you made. Okay, so we're going to move forward now. Now we will move on to some panel discussion. Before we proceed with the discussion, we will introduce 4 of the speakers and they'll each be given 2 minutes to present their organization's initiative. To start off, I would like to introduce Uche Okugo. Uche has the experience in project management, finance and business, and leadership and strategy. He's enthusiastic about supporting businesses by presenting attractive investment opportunities through the principles, tools, and techniques of economic development. Uche is the district governor-elect for Rotary 7080 and serves as the investment attraction coordinator with the city of Brampton. As an economic developer and social entrepreneur, he's committed to creating opportunity as an African and Caribbean market, driving inclusive economic growth and empowering communities. I'll now pass it on to Uche.
Thank you very much, Anika, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I'll start by saying Happy World Humanitarian Day. It's always a beautiful thing when we have opportunities to do good. I represent Rotary International, where I'm the district governor-elect for Rotary District 7080. It covers most of the GTA, the Waterloo region, Oxford County, and it's got about 45 Rotary clubs and 1,300 Rotarians. That's what we call ourselves, members of Rotary International. We are the world's first and oldest service organization, and we are in more than 200 countries and territories. We're headquartered in Chicago, and our motto is basically service above self. We have another motto that says, one profits most, who serves best. Rotary International is best known for our signature project, which is the eradication of polio. And we've been fighting polio since 1985. And we have our Global Polio Eradication Initiative team, which includes government agencies in the United States, the World Health Organization, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a couple of countries and individuals that contribute into that effort as well. And so aside from the fight against polio, which is now down to just 2 endemic countries, from the disaster we used to have years ago where polio affected over 350,000 children. Now we're down to 2 regions, and the projection is that by 2029, the world would have been eradicated of polio. We also have our 7 areas of focus, which basically is the area where all projects that we do through our foundation worldwide would fall under, whether it is disease prevention, maternal and child health care, peace and conflict resolution, basic education and literacy, supporting the environment. All these areas would typically cover all the project we do all over. And so We also work with partners in the industry as we go around either carrying out these projects or supporting disasters when they happen as well. We are always looking for partners because there's so much to do in the world, and we are happy to be part of this event and, of course, this organization. I know Obi very well. She's part of the family, so it's a pleasure to be here. And that is just a summary of Rotary International. I'm sure that as the panel goes on, I'll talk more about the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Uche, for your insights and initiatives. I'll now pass it on to my colleague.
Next, we have Dr. Chichi Menakea, founder and managing partner of Anoma Health. Chichi is a trauma orthopedic surgeon who leads clinical teams and drives improvements in complex healthcare settings. She has led research projects, presented nationally and internationally, and founded a program to prevent gender-based violence through advocacy and education. She's a passionate leader, mentor, and collaborator. She excels at uniting diverse teams to create meaningful change. Outside of work, she enjoys golf, event planning, and fashion. I'll now pass it on to Chichi.
Thanks, Aisha, and thanks everyone. I hope you can hear me. And I think everyone that's spoken before me, it's just been a fantastic way to spend my morning. And thank you so much for inviting me. And as we all said, it's Happy Humanitarian Day. Thank you so much. So a bit about what I do. I know Aisha talks about the fact that I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I have Anomo Health. So Anomo Health is actually a business part of what we do. But Anomo Health basically is like a bespoke concierge service that's been on operation for 14 years and it's actually available in 10 different countries. But what we do past that is we part of the funds that we make through the business goes to something called Anomo Foundation, which actually started about 9 years ago, initially as a focus mostly on empowering women, especially people that have been through domestic violence. And what we say is that what we actually do is try and get them to rebuild who they are by doing business projects for them. So we start businesses for women in Africa. In the UK, we work really closely with a lot of charities, including Histia, Women's Aid, and also the UK government itself, especially through the Mayor of London, to try and support a lot of refugees to get them to rebuild themselves by doing motivational afternoons or evenings that get people rebuilding their confidence. Now, during the pandemic, we decided that not only do people suffer from things that has to do with gender-based violence, there's also a huge gap on health because COVID-19 showed us a lot of things that were going on in the world. So we expanded our program from not just focusing on women empowerment, but also looking at healthcare. And our main focus on healthcare was how to support African countries to make health something that is actually available to everyone, no matter where you are, and making health accessible to people. So this year we're doing a project called Saving Lives in partnership with the ASR Africa and also the Federal Road Safety, starting out in Nigeria and also in Pakistan and India. And what this program is actually looking at trauma care in developing countries, because unknown to a lot of people, I know we talk a lot about malaria and HIV and AIDS, but actually trauma alone, so deaths from accidents, not just road traffic accident, but falls, actually kills more than 4 times the total deaths that we see from malaria, HIV, and even maternal and children's deaths that are under 1 year of age. So this year we're doing something called Saving Lives, which is actually a trauma training across developing countries, telling the people within the communities how to use things within their community to save lives. And this is actually done in partnership with Oxford University, Global Health at Oxford, and also Global Health at Harvard to try and train people. And I think that's it in a nutshell. So apart from us obviously being doctors and running a business, we've decided that we want to give back to the society by training people within the communities to actually take charge. And so I think today is really important because it's all about how do we all mobilize as individuals to make sure that wherever community we work in or where we're affiliated to, that people have basic foundation, which is healthcare, and they're able to look after themselves in order to do every other thing that they do. So I guess that's it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. Thank you so much for having me on this panel today.
Thank you, Chichi, for your initiative to gender-based violence and for protecting people from different humanitarian crises happening. I'll now pass it on to my colleague.
Next, we have Abdullah Dodd. He's an executive director of the Refugee Center and instructor at McGill's Max Bell School of Public Policy. With a background in cybersecurity, international relations, and political science, he brings a unique analytical lens to refugee policies. A board member of the Canadian Council for Refugee, he helped shape national policies and lead to a team that supports over 12,000 refugees annually with legal, housing, employment, and mental health services. His work centers on building sustainable, community-driven integration systems. I'll now pass it on to Abdullah.
Thanks for that intro and thanks for inviting me, and honestly very honored to be beside such esteemed panelists. You're all very cool. I looked you all up before I joined. So yeah, I hate talking about myself, so I'll just talk about the Refugee Center. So the Centre Refugee, or the Refugee Center, was started around 2015, and it was meant to focus on where we saw voids and gaps in refugee service delivery in Quebec and nationally in Canada as a whole. And we started with about 3 to 4 employees, and now we're closer to 50. So we're growing, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because it's showing us that the world's going to a dark place if our services are a high demand. And we're seeing increased displacement, as my colleagues have previously said. And that comes with, I think, a plethora of issues, both nationally and internationally, which I really hope we touch upon today, which I'm really looking forward to. And climate change is one of those issues, and it has a lot of different dynamics and perspectives of how it can displace individuals, both internally and externally. And we'll go through a couple of those examples as well through the panel discussion. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to learning more.
Thank you, Abdullah. We will now move on to the next panelist. I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Lastly, we have Ogene Maduke. Ogene is an innovative senior leader with an extensive experience in financial operations, reporting, budgeting, forecasting upgrades. She has led finance teams in both public and private sectors, including real estate and senior housing, where she drove major systems, implementations, and process improvement. Ogene is a certified chartered professional accountant and an executive MBA graduate from IE Business School in Spain. Ogene is a strategic thinker known for her servant leadership style. She currently serves on the boards of 2 nonprofits and is passionate about continuous learning and helping others reach their potential. I'll now pass it on to Ogene.
Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to Obi and team for putting this together and for inviting me into this space. I am truly honored. And I also want to thank the previous speakers. You've all been great, and I am humbled to be amongst you all. I'll just spend a minute talking about Equality Fund. We are a feminist organization that's really, our focus is on empowering women, girls, and gender expansive people across the world. We believe in the power, that there's a lot of power in these folks, and often enough, there's not enough to support that. So we are building a power base that's very ambitious, and we want to be the biggest funders of the gender equality in history. And some of the ways we do that is, you will see in our funding model, we focus on flexible, abundant, and unrestricted funding to feminist movements. We try to reach global communities of philanthropy and grantee partners all across the world. Beyond that, we also have our investing mechanism, which also amplifies this work that we're doing, which is also, it is a gender lens investment program that we do, where we focus on investing in gender-based products that yield real income that then we then use to do grassroots movements and support our grassroots movements across the world. I am proud to say that as of today, we have moved over 100 million to over 100 countries to over 1,000 grantee partners to date. And we continue to move. Our goal is in the next, hopefully, in the next 10 years, our goal is to reach to make that number go from 100 million to 1 billion. So we continue to move. But again, thank you for having me in this space, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for your initiative towards women empowerment, Ogane, and I hope you get that 1 billion. As we all can agree, we have an amazing lineup of panelists today. We're honored that they have taken their time to come and share their knowledge and expertise with us, and I hope we're all learning from them. Now I'll pass it on to Obi.
Thanks, Aisha. So I'll be moderating the discussion. The panel will include Uche Okugo, Dr. Chichi Melakaya, Abdullah Dawood, Ogena Madope, and Dasigno. So each panelist will have a question directed at them, and other panelists will be given the opportunity to contribute to their answer. There will be a minimum of 1 question per panelist, depending on time. So each answer will have a 2-minute time slot. At the end of the webinar, we will reach out to each panelist for answers to their remaining questions, which will be published in EnvironBuzz magazine. So now, the first panelist, and the first question goes to Darcino. Okay, so first question. Amidst all the doom and gloom, how do you find optimism in the future for the work and what you are, what you see all the time and what the news is around you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think if you do this kind of work, you have to have this eternal level of optimism to guide you through, even through the toughest times. And, I think I'm sure the other panelists would agree. I think you can find optimism through the people that you work with. Sometimes it takes these small stories of resilience, of people that have gone through unimaginable challenges and still come through the other side with this positive demeanor and this willingness to continue to take on the world and to thrive. And I think sometimes when when things are scary and things are overwhelming, I think it's looking for these sources of inspiration from the people that you work with, from your peers, from others. And so I think that is sort of the reservoir of optimism that I think we often try to draw upon.
Thank you. It's I know growing up, you have to have a heart, like to see people suffering all the time or being exposed or having to tell those stories. Like it's a lot of there's a lot happening and it's not always good. Yeah. I'm going to go straight to the next panelist, and this is for Abdullah Dawood. Okay. So in your experience, what are the most pressing challenges faced by displaced population when it comes to climate change and access to sources?
So yeah, it's a good question. I think there's 3 main big issues. When it comes to climate change itself, climate change is not basically a recognized reason for a person to seek safety or against persecution, essentially in a country. So the official definition of what constitutes a refugee legally does not include climate change. It's already tough enough to get the world to agree on the current definition. So changing it to add climate change has some political, I think, obstacles to it. In Canada itself, we haven't had an actual case where climate change was the main reason, where climate change could have been maybe the 3rd or 4th reason, but also maybe understanding what climate change is, right? So people, when they think climate change, just think, okay, like a hurricane hit or, a tsunami hit or, a big kind of disaster that was natural occurred. But climate change is more than that. It's the actual change in the environment around you, whether it was natural or man-made, right? And man-made, we know that climate change is accelerated by man-made, I think, actions. So, a classic example that we see, that's a mixture of like kind of like political persecution and climate change and the change environment around them is, we get a lot of individuals who are claiming from South America, specifically Colombia, Canadian mining companies in Colombia operate in a very aggressive manner that has a very negative influence around the climate in those areas. So it leads to drought, it leads to basically an abuse of existing resources and vegetation around the region, which produces poor economic outcomes, then introduces a concept of like lawlessness and we'll call these militias or mafias or gangs that displace those individuals because of their farmland. So you saw the cycle there. You saw a lot of basically 3 or 4 connections, and climate change is one of them. So climate change itself is not a reason, but climate change mixed with the result of climate change, I think, can be used. So that's one big challenge, is that legal definition and how Canada sees it. The second big challenge is, as a spokesman from the UCR said, we have over 120 million displaced individuals in the world. Not all of them have UNHCR refugee status, right? I think only around like 25 to 30 million do. The rest are just displaced without any sort of oversight body or international body to be able to serve them or give them status. So they're forced to claim asylum, right? And the asylum process in Canada, while I think is probably one of the better ones in the world, still has its issues. And refugee claimants, asylum seekers are without a lot of rights in Canada and are sometimes without work permits for a long period of time, don't have adequate rights to legal representation, don't have access to resettlement services. Resettlement services are only for permanent residents or protected persons, not for individuals who are considered still temporary by the government, right? So those are 2 big challenges that we see both internationally, nationally, and now more domestically, I think, is also the understanding of all of this. Because Canada is not used to this, right? Canada, before 2017, hasn't had a lot of refugee claimants. What was it, around 17, 20,000 people per year. Now we're seeing up to 180,000 people per year. And we don't have the system, we didn't build a system to accommodate these numbers. Thus, a lot of them are falling through the cracks. Thus, we're misspending, governments not doing the right policy decisions and misspending money, which is causing the politicization of the topic, and they get vilified. So they're already in a very vulnerable state, vulnerable status, and then they're in Canada, and then just due to the lack of understanding of that process, they're often blamed for a lot of structural, I think, or infrastructure issues in Canada that they have nothing to do with. So I know I gave you like 3 very, again, gloom and doom scenarios or reasons or challenges. But even with those challenges, we're seeing a lot of good outcomes. Refugee claimants do very well in Canada once their paperwork is put through. About 84% of the individuals that claim in Canada are accepted. That means like 84% of them have a legitimate fear of persecution because of their displacement. So there is bad, but there is good. And I think for us as community organizations, we have a lot of work to do to educate people on this particular topic.
Thank you. Thanks. That was great. That's great information. And just like Darcy, doom and gloom, you're experiencing, but you keep moving, but then there's still wins in it, right? And I guess that keeps you going because you see the good that comes out of the work that we do. All right. So next, I'm going to go to next panelist is Dr. Chichi Menakaya, right? And the question is this: what role can cross-sector collaboration play in strengthening healthcare systems resilience during time of crisis? So what role can cross-section collaboration play in strengthening healthcare systems resilience during time of crisis?
Okay, thanks so much, Obi. Thank you so much for that question. So first of all, I want to say that let's assume that we all believe that hospitals save lives, right? But there's no way hospital is going to work if the power grid is down, the roads are not working, and the banks can't collapse around you. So I like to describe resilience as that resilience is never built by health alone. So for example, a hospital cannot deliver oxygen, for example, if telecoms is not working, right? So let's assume we need oxygen in the hospital and we have to ring someone if we run out to be able to say, okay, can we get this hospital? So that's things like we need to put the power grid alive. We need to make sure there's also logistics, right? To get those cylinders across a flooded bridge. Let's assume that there's like a crisis in the world, right? And then we're also able to say that we need to have banks to be able for countries where people pay for their own healthcare to be able to have cash for those families to be able to access healthcare. So I like to say that for me, having run a concierge company for like 14 years, one thing I've actually noticed is that for you to be able to have resilience and strength in everything that has to do with healthcare, cross-sector collaboration is a must, not even like a necessity. Because unless we start thinking about health as a foundation, and actually that at every single discussion, like we're doing here, that the health is at the table with aviation, is at the table with like humanitarian work, with fintech, with telecoms, with things like even faith leaders, because what people believe will affect how much they're doing, how they look after their health, then we're not going to ever be able to actually get health to the people that need it. So I want to say that when you have crisis, the point is that there has to be readiness, right? We need to make sure that every single sector is actually involved. So things like having MOUs ahead of time, running the drill so that if something went wrong, we know who to call when the lights go off. I'll give you an example. I've been working in Canada now for 1 year, and certain times we've had like power cutouts while we're operating in the OR, right? But because there's someone that knows that they need to turn on the generators to keep the lights on and keep the oxygen going for patients that are asleep, then we're able to actually do what we need to do. And I know when you think about that, you think, oh, maybe that's not a crisis, but it is a crisis because of the blackouts. And there's a patient lying there, their whole body could be opened up and every single second counts. So I strongly believe that when the health sector, the private sector, and the government train together, these systems will not cause us to panic, because when the storm comes, what happens is that we actually collaborate as one unit, and that means that we're not going to be able to be broken. And I think, to be honest with you, every single sector has to be together to have this conversation when it comes to delivering health at the optimal level that we want to deliver it.
Thank you. That's great, Chichi. That was good. Yes, everything is connected. You need, in order to do the work that you need to do, there are multiple skill sets, multiple people that need to be in play for those things to happen, multiple organizations. So yes, that's key, preparedness. All right, so next panelist, we're going to go to Ogena Maduekwe. So, question for you is, how can funding models shift to better support women and marginalized groups during humanitarian or climate-related crisis?
Thank you, Obi. That's a very good question. I think one of the things we find in the humanitarian space, I should prefix this by saying that this is one of the areas that we're starting to move into. And what we're finding is that they're often very slow in responses. Voices are overlooked, especially when it comes to women, girls, and gender expansive. And we find that funding in this area is also can be very restrictive to what you can do with some of those fundings. So I think what you're looking at are areas of flexibility. There needs to be some major flexibility in the funding and the direct access to that funding to those that actually do need to do the work. The current space that in the humanitarian space tends to be that most of the large funding goes to the bigger organizations, the bigger NGOs, and then it flows down. But oftentimes what happens with that is that at least from, I'm speaking now from a feminist and women, girls sort of perspective, what we find is that those specific sector tend to be overlooked. We tend to focus on basic things like, yes, water, safety, and all of that. But within all of that, there are special needs of these particular folks that often get overlooked. So the funding not only needs to be flexible and faster, but it also needs to be gender responsive. There needs to be a space for funding for things other than the basic, the way we look at what humanitarian needs are. And this is another area where we are looking to make some major significant moves as well. And this is in conjunction with other women's funds across the world. We're all seeing the same thing. There's also the need for anticipating and responding. What does that mean? We are currently starting to fund initiatives that help build the foundation and the building blocks to be ready for, I think Dr. Chichi mentioned that a little bit earlier, to be ready to respond when crises occur rather than waiting for crisis to come before you start to do the responses. And this is part of what causes the delay, part of what causes the lack of flexibility in the funding. So at least from our work, part of our area of focus is also funding to build those foundations and build those blocks so that when there are crises, we are ready to respond and we are ready to support. And these are things that these are ways that funding can help. One of the things we're also, this is very, very early stages for us, but it's also in digital funding. Some of the issues that we come across oftentimes is that you want to fund some particular regions, but you find that you can't even get the funds to them. There were times where we're trying to fund crisis areas, but our grantee partners are not in a position to actually receive the funds. They're having to move from places to places and hiding. And so even to get the funds to them tends to be very difficult. So we're looking at digital funding, but one of the things that we do now is actually allow, as a feminist organization, we tend to work on a trust base that's very important to us as part of the ways we work. And so one of the things that we try to do in these type of regions is make the funding flexible, where we know they may not be able to get the funding into the bank, but they may have to go do a cash out. And so we find mechanisms, or we find middle parties in somewhere in the middle that can support us. Believe it or not, some of the limitations we also have sometimes has to do with the regulatory as well. We may not be, because we do also get government funding from Canadian government as well. We do get limitations as to where we can fund. So oftentimes we find that we are limited in when we want to respond to some of these things, and we don't. I think finally I'll touch on the community driven. When we do funding, we always look at how we involve the community in the process, because we are so far out removed, and it's very important that those voices are the people that feel the crisis the most, tend to be the most underrepresented. But we flip it when we do this sort of work, to have that representation, and in some cases actually dial back and let them make the decisions on where some of these fundings can go. And so these are some of the ways that we try to, at least from our work, that we work on these areas to ensure that funding is flowing to crisis. But I think one of our biggest goals, which I firmly believe in, is also in anticipating and building and being ready to respond prior to waiting for crisis. Because I think if the world has taught us something, we do know that crisis will always come. So in anticipating and being ready and having those foundations so that when we have to respond, we're ready to go.
Thank you again. That was very insightful. Yeah, gender issues, dealing with women, funding, you really have to be innovative, right? In getting the money across. It's and that's real. That's real. Okay. So next panelist is Uche Okugo. So I think I will ask you this question. I think this is going to be, what lessons have you learned from building community-led action networks that others could replicate?
Thank you very much, Obi. So Rotary International basically ensures that our structure moves from the international headquarters to the zones, to the districts, and cascades down to the clubs. And at the club level, clubs are encouraged to have multiple committees and subcommittees. Clubs are encouraged to have every Rotarian involved in serving the community because it provides the best opportunity to truly reach everybody. They're also encouraged to work with multiple community groups so that whatever we are trying to cover within our areas of focus is also in partnership with organizations either doing related work, so we can come in and join them in making it better or reaching more people, or we're working in partnership with the public or private sector just so that we can actually reach more people. So at the grassroots level, once you work from point of collaboration, there's a lot you can achieve. And it begins from basic project management type tools and techniques that we deploy, starting from things like needs assessment. From that, you would have to actually reach out to the people on ground, the leaders of the market organization, the farmers association, local banks, the professionals on ground serving these local people, government at the local structure. So once you're reaching them to find out what the challenges are, you're not only hearing what their immediate needs are, you're actually hearing efforts in the past that they've deployed in trying to resolve that issue, and either they've made little headway or they've made no headway. And also, we're trying to find out these needs at that community level. You are reaching out to just about everybody that these issues affect directly. So you're not coming from a level where you're working with some research, probably, that has just covered a problem from the surface or at a high level. And so over the years, basically since 1907, that's the model we've deployed, working with the grassroots and reaching out. And now, because we've done it over and over again, and we've seen that the structure works, it's exactly what we've continued doing. We reach out to the people on ground to work with the local Rotary clubs. And then we also have a structure of funding for those projects, and we call it matching grant system. So once you find those needs, you can now easily find stakeholders that will help you in resolving those needs. And usually it goes beyond just Rotary clubs or the entire Rotary structure. That's how we've been able to attract the partners that work with us on our project, especially in the eradication of polio. And if I use the polio eradication as a model, we've succeeded in garnering partners that have deployed billions of dollars. Till date, we've spent over $16 billion trying to eradicate polio since 1985. And that is because we have foot soldiers. We do the work on the ground. We do constant research. We're reaching out to people to get information. And so it's been very important to Rotary to work on this model, keep making it better, and while encouraging other organizations doing different work to imbibe this model as well, we also come with a sense of collaboration because we can't do it alone. There's a lot of issues in the world. Even focus on polio alone, there's so much to be done. Right now, it's endemic in 2 nations, but even those 2 nations are plagued with different issues. And so we have to be speaking to the government for access. We have to be speaking to partners for funding. We have to be speaking to grassroots people also to be foot soldiers, to be on ground to help out with things like immunization, data collection, and working with local families to actually allow their children to be immunized. And so this is a structure and a model that has worked. And one way this model was tested was first during the Ebola outbreak. That model helped us tackle the outbreak, and also during COVID-19 outbreak. Some nations were almost not affected because they just used the structure on ground and worked on informing people, supporting people, and actually getting containment deployed in this regard. So that's the model we've been working on, and it's something we think that organizations can imbibe going forward to ensure that whatever challenges are out there, they're tackled together, especially deploying collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Uche. Yeah, Rotary Club is doing amazing work. So yes, and it's a big machine, right? And it's doing great work all over the world. Yep.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go into a live Q&A session, right? And we're going to open it up to everybody that, everybody, all participants, so you can ask your questions. So you can raise your hand or drop your questions in the chat. I think we have good time, so we can ask the questions.
We have a question in the chat for Darcy.
We did all the time, so together.
What do you think is the first step to healing the reef? From Evelyn.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, no, in my remarks earlier, I talked about how there is this rift, this polarization that exists, and I think how it inevitably prevents action from going forward, and certainly it's this constant struggle as we become more as we're taking sides, we're sort of fighting with each other, and this is why I posed it as a challenge. We need to move past this, because the consequences that we are seeing right now are too great for us to be fighting from different teams. So I think part of it is certainly putting some genuine effort into understanding different perspectives. We're not going to agree with everybody, but there are different spectrums of understanding that we can have, or there are levels of parts where we can find consensus. Maybe we don't agree with all the solutions. Maybe we might not find agreement with somebody else on different solutions for addressing climate change. But maybe we can come to an agreement that it's not normal for us to have summer after summer where we're seeing wildfire smoke covering our cities. Can we start at finding some of those points of consensus? And we can start with some of that, then maybe we can start to work on some common understanding. So this is not easy work, but I think it is important work, and I think it is a way that we need to move forward, because the more divided we get, the more it continues as it currently is.
Thanks, Darcy. Yep. Yeah, we need to close that divide. We need to close the reef for real solutions to really take place. And the how, right? The how is what the struggle is, right? Or we know the how, but the will to do it, the politicking around it. Okay, I see another question, right? I think from Evelyn Oboro. So you say, I like that. So tailoring each action to the situation and the stakeholders and finding common points first, right? Okay, so that's an answer to Darcy, right? Okay, that's a comment for Darcy. Do we have any other questions? Okay. I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to go back up so that I'm going to go to Abdullah. What does meaningful inclusion of the spaced voices look like in humanitarian decision-making spaces?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You cut out.
Now, what does meaningful inclusion of displaced voices look like in humanitarian decision-making spaces?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I can look at various different ways. So how it looks like for us, for example, we're very data driven. So basically, like we always joke around, like you can't really take a breath inside our office without somebody picking it up and documenting it. And I think this is very important. I think we're pretty much guided by the use case, or what I would say, I guess, the pathway or the experience of our of the people that we serve, right? Um, we try to understand everything they go through from point A to point Z, and the only way to do that is to either have lived experience or sit down with a lot of them and take as much information and data as you can possibly take. And we do both. We're proud to say that we're refugee led. I myself came to Canada as a refugee, and it really guides, I think, our principles of what it means to be a refugee and what the experience is like and what we can do to move forward. And the landscape is also not static. It's very dynamic. So what I mean by that is the processes of which displaced individuals have to go through the legal system or the social system or whatever it may be can change pretty much week to week, right? Somebody could have lived experience, but that lived experience can change completely in a couple of weeks to somebody else because the laws changed or the procedures changed or the way the government works changed. And the only way to respond to that is also to be dynamic and fluid yourself. So inclusion always has to happen, and that can happen in various ways. There's no one right way to do it. There's multiple right ways to do it. You pretty much have to walk in the shoes of individuals that you're serving as much as you can. And in decision-making spaces, that is a very broad term. It can mean different things. But at least in our context, a lot of decisions aren't always, people always think decisions are like somebody signing off on something, right? Like, oh, I think it should be done like this. Here's my signature. That's a decision. All our decisions are guided by our clients. Thus, they're the ones who helped us make those decisions. Just because, we didn't sign off on the names of like the, 150 people that we talked to that week, doesn't mean that those decisions weren't being made or guided by those individuals or the clients that we have. So also keep in mind that decision making in organizational spaces isn't always the definition that we're taught when we're younger, right? So yeah, that's how I would perceive it to be, at least in our organization. And maybe to tie it to the previous question that went to Darcy, when we make decisions that try to combat, I think, the polarization that we're seeing internationally when it comes to displaced individuals or immigration or whatever it may be, in the world of policy, you always try to create policy to serve the masses, right? We rarely create policy to serve a very specific minority of people or class of people, because when you do that, it's going to have a rippling effect on everyone else, right? What we're seeing with polarization and division, to the extent that we're seeing it now, which is very large, this type of division really only serves or creates profit for a very specific set of people, right? For a minority of people, division is profitable, right? And the ones who suffer are usually the most vulnerable. So in this case, populations at large are going to be suffering from this polarization, because if we try to do these restrictive policies, if we try to create deterrence around migration, or if we try to blame everything on one group of people, we're not actually tackling the issues that we're facing structurally, right? We're just diverting blame and keeping the status quo. And the status quo is not serving anyone, right? It's poor policy decisions, poor outcomes, nothing being done, and everyone's suffering. So we have to ensure that we communicate that to an extent. and we have to do it as cohesively as possible and as a community. And that's, again, speaking to Darcy's points, is that we can all have to be in it together and find that common ground.
That's great. Thanks, Abdul. That's good. That's good. Does anybody else want to add to it? Okay. So if not, we'll go to, I think there's a question, another question on here. So are there any policies that actually seek to connect climate action to humanitarian crisis, or actions to enlighten policymakers? Does anybody want to answer that? I can repeat that again. So are there any policies that actually seek to connect climate action to humanitarian crisis, or actions to enlighten policymakers?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a run at that if you'd like. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of policies that Canada enacts pretty much internationally or foreign policy wise that create climate disasters that result in the displacement of people, whether it be through our mining operations or our trade relations or whatever it may be, right? There has been a push both internally and externally, so internally in the government and externally by like community organizations, to push for more sustainable investment practices, to push for more I say ethical investment practices, where we're not depending so much on mining, where we're not depending on drilling, for example, or we're not depending on having an industry of weapon sales that create climate disasters and profiting off of that. So that movement has existed, for I think a long time, but has really picked up steam since, I would say, 10, maybe 12 years ago. And that has pushed the government to create different investments and put up challenges to private industry and public industry alike to come up with alternative means of investments for the government to do impact. So we see that through the ESDC Sustainability Fund. We see that in our 5 to 10 year strategy that the Canadian government has adopted in terms of its investments abroad and overseas. So those are things that have been done, but they're not immediate. They're not going to cause immediate change. Those things, unfortunately, take a substantial amount of time. But they are there, and it's a push, I think, in a good way, in the right direction.
That's good. Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? I don't know if we can go with one more question.
If I
Maybe
can
one more.
just jump in, I wanted to
Yeah.
touch on the inclusion part, and just to mention the financial inclusion and the importance of it. And that is one area that we also do a lot of work in, and we find that very meaningful. Oftentimes in the space that we operate in, one of the things that are very very obvious is the lack of inclusion in the financial space for women and girls, whether it's access to credit or savings that tends to be limited in certain areas. So empowering women, empowering girls can be very, very helpful in helping build this resilience that's needed, and to be able to respond to not just crisis, but even just the basic needs and the basic lives of people. So I just wanted to mention the importance of financial inclusion, not just from the inclusion overall, but the financial aspect, and how powerful it is to make sure that they are part of that conversation. In our investment, gender lens investment programs, this is one of the areas that we tend to focus on. We invest in women-led or women-inclusive type organizations that advance this sort of work. And oftentimes, I'm happy to say that, believe it or not, our return on investments tend to be even more profitable than gender lens type investment. And we've done this comparison for years now, and we've often come out on top. So there's proof that it's very meaningful and it's working.
That's great. That's great. Okay, that's really great. Okay, so I'm going to end this. You guys have been absolutely amazing, right? Thank you all. It's been an excellent panel discussion. You guys are all doing amazingly, doing great work in your organizations, and the world is really a better place with all of you in it. So um, we're good. We're happy with that. So in order to keep for time, so I think Shanika will do the last poll. So
Okay.
while we're doing, so while that poll is going on, right? Aisha, you can look at the community challenge.
Okay. So we have our last poll, which will be on actions you will take. So just take a minute to answer that question.
In honor of World Humanitarian Day, we're inviting everyone to take meaningful action by choosing how they want to give back. Join us as a mentor or mentee via our Slack channel. Mentees can volunteer your skills with a local group, raise awareness through content or art, or start a mini community project, while mentors can support and mentor our mentees. Each week, simply share your progress in our Slack channel, the purpose in action, including the cause you're supporting, the skill you used, what progress you've made, and what you've learned. Don't forget to check the announcement channel for updates. Complete your purpose skills self-assessment form and make your pledge. Everyone who participates will receive a digital certificate, and outstanding efforts will be spotlighted across our channel. Let's come together to make a real impact, one action at a time.
So our next webinar will be on September 29th in honor of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, which is titled From Waste to Value, Tackling Food Loss of People, Planet, and Prosperity. Learn how we can tackle food waste together and build more a sustainable future. Stay tuned for more information.
Okay, so I think we'll close this session. I'll leave a quote. Humanity is the greatest cause. It's UNOCHA that put that quote, said that quote. So thank you all for joining From Crisis to Community. We are deeply grateful to our speakers and panelists for their insights and to our funders for making this conversation possible. Today's discussion reminds us that connecting humanitarian action with climate, rights, and sustainable development is not just necessary, it's urgent. Let's take these ideas forward, collaborate, and turn challenges into opportunities for resilient, inclusive communities. So thank you for your engagement, and we look forward to continuing this dialogue together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. And
Bye.
thank you, Obi.
Bye.